everyone, so we're out here at Computex for 2025, and we're at Antec's booth right now. So Antec's got two cases coming up. This is the Flux Pro that we already reviewed, except it now has different color fans. So they're doing the Noctua edition, working with Noctua on the Flux Pro. Really interesting case because the Flux Pro already was a chart topper on our the benchmarks for case thermal performance, and now they're adding very expensive but very high-performing fans into the case. So looking forward to testing that. Now, the company is also bringing back the Antec 900, which we just double-checked, and I have bad news for a lot of you. The Antec 900 came out in 2006, and a lot of people in our audience built with it, so I am sorry. This is a very long time ago. So there were two versions of the 900 I remember. They did the 2006 model, which is the one everyone probably remembers. It was a much different time. The case was very well liked. And by today's standards, there were a lot of things that, if they launched it today, it wouldn't work. Like the kill management back then didn't exist. It wasn't really a thing yet. And it did get the sort of the thermal side right. They went with larger fans. It was heavily ventilated. So they're trying to bring that back with a TBD name Antec 900 model, which is this one. It's got a lot of aluminum in it. And currently, this version of it as built also has Noctua fans, but they're not brown. These are the NF820s, which we've actually reviewed and benchmarked, the 200 mil fans from Noctua in the past. They did pretty well in our testing. So that's one option. They're going to do another one that's a 6-fan layout with the same as the original Flux Pro, which is back here, and this is the one we reviewed. So that's what we're going to look at for Antec's setup at Computex. And with that, let's get into it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermalright and the Frozen Prism 360 liquid cooler. Thermalright's Frozen Prism is one of the most affordable liquid coolers on the market and is able to achieve competitive results with a high cold plate convexity that applies pressure centrally to the silicon area based on our testing. This works on both AMD and Intel. We previously benchmarked the Frozen Prism and found that it's overall competitive for its price point. The cooler comes in a few color variations. It has a blackout option and an RGB option, and it's the cheapest liquid cooler we've tested anytime recently that still hits performance markers. Learn more at the link in the description below. So we'll start with the Flux Pro Noctua edition. Changes they've made. So they've added the word Noctua to it. Pretty straightforward on that. They've added the fans, or changed them, I guess. And then the panel coloring's different. So this brown paneling for the steel components, as I'm told, was actually pretty difficult to get right. So one of the things we've learned over the years is that manufacturing to try and color match between different types of materials is apparently very hard. Pretty much every factory we've been to has told us this. So you've got types of plastics for the fan color and then steel. And so they spent over a month trying to get the brown, the correct brown, to make Noctua happy with how the brown came out. So I think everyone's happy with it. So that's what they're going to go with. Other changes, actually internally, it's more coloring stuff. And I've got a fan hub in my hand too that we'll look at. So internally, the rubber grommets apparently were more difficult than the steel panels to get to be the correct shade of brown, because this is, you can't just like use the same mixture between the two materials. And then the top, the power supply shroud, is another steel component that is also brown. These are the removable mesh inserts. We talked about these in our review of the Flux Pro. So if you don't know about this case, we already have a full, very detailed review of it. The tooling is the same, the case is the same, so all the same stuff we talked about, good and bad, it would all remain in this. With the exception of the changes to the fans and the colors. Now, Noctua also is probably going to include, or is at least seriously considering including, this fan hub. So there's no ARGB, which makes sense because their fans don't have RGB LEDs. And this is just an 8 PWM fan connector. It's a control PCB. So it's got SATA power one side, feeds out to the board, and then you've got 8 fan connections. And in this case, they ship with 6. So that's already the situation for the original Flux Pro. It's the same sizes and layouts. They've got two 120s on the bottom. These were reverse blade on the original. And then those are the NF-A12 G2s, which are new fans. And then the NF-A14 G2s are in the rest of the case. There's one 140 in the back. There's 3 140s in the front. So there's the NF-A14. These are NF-A12. And then those are the G2 models, which the G2 model we talked about in the NHD 15 G2 review. So that cooler has the G2 fans where they will slightly offset the RPM intentionally to try and avoid certain like beat frequency phenomena and stuff like that where it'll create an undesirable noise. So that's Noctua's whole approach for the G2s. Now the rest of this case, so the backside here, from what I understand, it sounds like Noctua is also possibly going to be using these extension cables. We're not 100% sure right now, but that's what they have at least in this sort of early build of the case. So these are pretty nice. We actually use these in our test benches with the different colors. But I think that mostly covers the Flux Pro. I mean, it's a brown and black version of the Flux Pro, which is a case that we already liked in our review, and it has different fans now that in theory should be at least maybe a little better, or at least roughly the same, potentially different RPM. So for the rest, the price is TBD. Looking at it, so the Flux Pro original is about $180 right now retail. That's with the 6 fans. And this is probably somewhere around $200 of Noctua fans in this case. I don't have the exact pricing right now, but I think it's like these are roughly in that $40 plus or minus $10 range. These are like 30 to something, also plus or minus $10. So you end up with, it's gonna be like maybe a, I don't know, high 300s, $400 case, something like that for Noctua. Release date, they're targeting Q4. It will be sold by Noctua. So Antec is working with them on the case. Noctua is selling. And then the case is also supposed to include the tiny Noctua keychain. They have a small like 40 mil fan or something keychain that we don't have with us. And I think that covers this one. So let's look at the Antec 900. So onto the 900. Like I was saying, the history for this one, I talked about this last year when we were in the same room covering Antec stuff last year. But the first PC build I did was in the Antec Super Landboy, which was in the silver colored, I think, aluminum chassis with an acrylic side panel. Later did the 900 build. So that came out in 2006. I think the V2 or the 902 they called it came out in about 2009. Been a while. And then Antec eventually went to the 1200s. They did numerous of those. They kind of disappeared for several years there in the mid-2010s, and then came back in the last couple of years with the C8 in particular, and have kind of re-emerged on the radar. So this version of the 900 is pretty different from the old one, which is a good thing at this point. The old one was a great case. It is not anymore. But the stuff to go over here, so there's 2 versions. There's going to be the dual 200 millimeter option, potentially with Noctua. Pricing on all this is TBD. That one's probably going to be in at least $300 or so, and we don't have the price on the model that's going to have 6 fans. But these are mounted to some fan rails. So if we look down here, the fan rails can be offset to different locations. So these can be moved with a couple screws for each rail, and those shift inward to these other positions. So it's currently set up for 200s. I think that might be a 180. That's a 140. That's a 120. And it could be reconfigured for the fans by using those. So well, actually, let's go through the top panel first. So the top panel, they're still using this basically massive hole design and then just using a dust filter. So in some ways this is traditional. The upside of this is that the actual panel itself is not doing a whole lot other than just providing structure. So it's not really getting in the way of flow because of how huge these holes are. So it's really going to come down to the porosity of this dust filter for how much air it can get through. Now this is a filter on the exhaust. So if you do exhaust up here, honestly, I would just pull that filter out because it's not really stopping a whole lot of dust from getting in there. And then one other thing to point out is this inner plastic on the filter actually ends up completely obstructing this outermost row of holes. They got to cover something to get it in there. And I guess this is maybe a symmetry choice where they cover the entire one so it doesn't look as bad as like a half open hole, but it is losing a little bit of accessibility. However, in the top panel, which actually this fan tray can be removed, you end up with partial obstructions over here anyway, just for motherboard clearance. Can't shift that far over. So this is 120/140s, and then it's a couple screws here on each side to pull this tray out, like we've seen in a lot of other cases now. And then removing the glass panel, which is a gigantic piece of glass. So internally, some of this is familiar to things the Flux Pro is doing in that it's got possible shroud top fans, and then fortunately they have ventilated this side panel, which is good. There's no filter included on this one, so this is just a mesh panel. And then they've also punched a ton of holes into the bottom of the case, so if there are shroud top fans, they should be able to breathe. Another thing I liked is the dust filter is accessible from the front. Patrick always points this out in the reviews of the cases we do, rather than having to pull it out of the back. And then power supply sits on these giant rubber standoffs, and it's got the I-shift mount, which Antec is also doing in the Flux series cases that we already reviewed. For drives, so there's 2 SSD mounts on the top of the shroud in the back here. There's another, I think it's 3 on the back side of the case. And then for the rest, this sort of cheese grater of holes means it is BTF compatible. They've got 2 sets of grommets here, which I like to see because cases that try to support so-called EATX boards or SSI CEB, for example, if it comes all the way out to here on the board, then you end up covering your first set of pass-throughs anyway. So they've punched another set through here to actually make sure you can run the cable still on the larger ones. So back panel here. This is also a gigantic, this panel is humongous. So perforated on the bottom here again, which is another good detail for breathability if there's a shroud top fan. And our understanding is in the 6-fan model, they want to do the same exact configuration as in the Flux Pro. So it'd be 2 120s, probably reverse blade, and then 4 140s, 6 fans total. That'd be the 2 120s go on the shroud top there. So that is most of the case. A couple other points here. So the frame is aluminum, and then the motherboard tray is steel. I think this is a 0.8 mil thick steel or so. And aluminum is very expensive. I guess they're doing it for sort of like, sometimes case companies do this for a quote-unquote premium feel to it. Unfortunately, it does make it expensive, makes it a little lighter, so that's a benefit. But right now, there's still the additional tariff on aluminum imports, so that could affect the pricing. Like I said, it's going to be $300 plus for all of this, and we'll find out more probably closer to the end of the year or something. Last feature I want to point out is this top panel pops up. So this is just the front I/O, and it pops out like that. And things that this could be useful for as an end user would primarily be, I mean, once you pull this, you have full access through the top, but open loop access is a little better, and then also getting a radiator in and out would be a little easier. So mostly open loop and water cooling stuff. I think that covers these cases. So that's what we've got for now from Antec. We'll be testing these as they come in. The Flux Pro with the Noctua fans I really want to test. Technically, we could do that right now. I could just go spend hundreds of dollars on those fans and put them in our existing Flux Pro, and we could benchmark it. But we'll wait for the full model to come out. I don't know if Noctua is doing any fancy tuning with the fan packs for it. They've done that with their coolers. So that'll cover this. Subscribe for more as always. There's going to be a ton more news coming for the show. And you go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to support us directly. And we'll see you all next time.